Hi everyone, this is Ben Colby, Teen Librarian, with a advanced video to talk about a container with a hinged lid. Let's start first by talking about hinges, and let's create that part. So it's going to be an inside-outside kind of structure. So let's start by making everything 10. And I'll just flatten that and then duplicate it and move it over and duplicate it one more time. And this I want to move over to here. And I'm going to shrink this down to 10 and stretch it so that there's just... So the idea is this is going to be the shape that we use for the hinge. And actually, you could probably extend whatever's happening this way out like that. So we're going to create a rotating structure between these pieces. And just this is 20 by 20 by 10. And the middle one, which I can stretch just a little more, maybe not, is 72 by 20 by 10. And we'll resize this later once we have it right. So what are we going to do to build the actual hinge structure between these two things? Let's use a cylinder. I'm going to take the cylinder, I'm going to shrink it to 10 by 10. I'm going to zoom in and tip it 90 degrees to the side. Oops, hit D to get it on the surface if necessary. And then stretch it to the point where it's going to overlap with both of these pieces by several millimeters each. This is going to be the hole shape that we create. If I make that a hole, yeah, so you can see the little top poking out there. It gives you an idea of how far it goes into the shape. That's fine. Just make sure you have enough space in there for the pin to fit in and not wiggle around too much. Or what I mean is the pin is going to extend in there enough that it won't slide out. So let's take this shape. It's not perfectly lined up. I'm just going to change that one back into a solid, that duplicate. So let's line this up. How did we have this before? I want it to be on the edge. That works. And maybe just a tiny bit, or well, let's just extend this 1 millimeter extra to hold that. All right, so now is the time to cut the hole out. And you can see the holes cut out pretty well there. And do you want a solid shape to be exactly the same size as the hole you just cut out? No, you want it to be a little bit smaller. So this is 10 by 10. I'm going to hold shift and bring it down to, let's say 9.0, roughly, 8.99. I'm going to lift it off the ground by 0.5 millimeter, which requires me to change my snap grid down to 0.5. It's got to be exactly 0.5 off the ground because I just shrunk it by 1, and I want a gap of 0.5 all the way around. We may need to stretch the length. So let's see how the length seems to fit in here. This definitely isn't going far enough. It's okay to stretch it this way as long as we're not warping it in any other direction. Try to just, you don't want it to overlap with anything. But that's pretty good. Oop, not quite centered. I can see that looks better. And is it okay over here? It looks okay to me. Before I go on, let's just make a duplicate of this shape. I'm going to Alt and drag, make it into a hole, stretch it a little more, lift it halfway to the middle of this shape, and do a cutout with just these shapes. The reason, oops, Undo that. I want it to actually group with all of these shapes. And so this is giving me an idea of what the pin looks like in the center. And my question is there a gap all the way around? Yes, there is over here. Is there a gap all the way around over here? I gotta get creative with the camera to see. But yeah, it looks fine. There's a gap all the way around. I like it. So this is a way for me to verify that I have my hinge lined up before moving on, because it's going to get impossible to adjust very quickly. So let's ungroup that, get that shape out of there. And you can just go ahead and line this up. And this should be plenty of support to hold up that pin. It'll print just fine. There's a little gap on both sides. Love it. So let's get rid of that. And I'm going to group these three things together. And I now have a hinge shape that I can change the size of if I need to. Okay, so what is the shape of our container? It could be anything, but I'm just going to use a circle container for today. It could be a flat container, or let's see, we don't want it to be more than 100 millimeters. Just because, well, actually I can go up to 250, so I guess I could go up to 125 or less. So I'm going to just shrink that back down to 10, or roughly 10. And let's see, I could even shrink it down more. Since if all I want it to be is a lid, well, 10 is okay. Goodness. Okay. And so what's the size of this? 106 by 106. Fine. So I'm going to Alt, click, and drag. You can see we might have a little bit of a problem here. Just trying to get it to attach, but that's okay. We'll figure that out. One thing we can do is extend these red things, or we could add another shape to take care of that. We just want to make sure that this doesn't, when this turns, it doesn't hit the other shape. All right, so how are we going to do this? There may be many ways to do it. All right, let me just use an example of something. If I were to just stretch that, make another shape, fine. And I could make this, let's say, the bottom part of the container. Maybe you're starting to see it. So the idea is that this would be the main part of the container. This would be the lid. And I would cut out the center of the container here. That will definitely work. But let me propose a challenge to you. Think about this. Let me zoom in a little bit. As this starts to rotate, will it completely close up and match the other shape? The answer is no. It won't line up perfectly, and it won't close. It'll get stuck when this part crashes into this part. The way we're going to solve that is by lifting one of these pieces off the ground. What's the best way to do that? I'm going to lift this piece off the ground by 10, and that gives it room. Now we have room for the other 10 to flip over onto there. Also, this piece is a little crude and getting in the way. First of all, let's see. What if I just do that? It's 4 millimeters wide. It's still, you know, there's a lot there. I don't love that. But actually, I don't know. I mean, it's a little weird. It's a little big and weird. If we had a different kind of box, a different kind of container, we might be able to hide that a little better. But I actually kind of like that. I also want to make sure that this moves out a little bit because this is the radius where it's turning. So I've got how far from this turn radius to the edge of the thing? Well, it's about from here to here, or about 10 millimeters. So I want to make sure that the turn radius, which is right here also, this shape is about 10 millimeters away from it. So that when you flip it, it'll line up better. Shoot, nope. I should undo that because I don't want to warp the shape of this at all. What I can do is ungroup it. And I think, is this shape still separate? Yeah. And that I can just drag onto the thing. And now I think if I group everything, how about that? I think I still have the hinge working. Oh, shoot, you know what? That, if this is going to turn, I need to make another cutout right here, don't I? Well, that's simple enough. Let me actually, if I want just this shape, and I'm going to, undo, going to Alt, oh, how about that? I actually messed it up. All right, I'm duplicating, I'm making it a hole, and I'm sliding it over this way. And once again, if a solid shape is supposed to fit into a hole, you need the hole to be just a little bigger. So I'll move it up and enlarge it just a little bit. And now I think what happens when I regroup everybody is, yep, I have a cutout right here. And I think now my lid will actually turn to cover the thing, to cover the rest of the shape. Now, you may ask, well, yeah, but hold on, it's floating off the ground. How can you print that? Well, we have to add supports to this. Anything that's floating off the ground, it helps if it's flat. It'll really, oh, and you know what? I'm going to ungroup one more time because I want to take just this big cylinder shape and Alt drag it away off to the side. Oops, made an extra one. Let's regroup all of this because I want a hole shape that is made from the original. So let's well, no, that's probably too much of a shrink, right? Because I want maybe 2 or 3 or 4 millimeters on each side. So that means I would go from 106 down to 100 or the high 90s. That's fine. And I can just leave it like that and leave that top as the solid part. Or I can cut in a little more, no big deal. Oh, we just have to make sure we're cutting out of the bottom. Guess you could stretch it like this to do that. Fine. So now I just need to recenter. I'm hitting F to recenter. Let's see if we can center this perfectly on our cylinder shape. I don't know if it's perfect, but it's not bad. Group. Okay, this is great. So now the hole is cut out. So supports. This rim around the edge is definitely going to need supports holding it up. But the fact that it's flat and horizontal means that when we get to that layer, it'll be fine. It'll be nice and solid all the way around. Up here, the inside that's hollow, you might ask, don't we need supports to hold that up too? The answer is no. We only need supports when something is either floating in space or sticking out in space. This is what we call a bridge. It goes from one solid point in a perfect horizontal line to another solid point. The 3D printer is just fine at stretching a plastic line from here to here and creating a bridge. So if it's a flat surface with a solid outside, it does not take supports. But the outside will have just a little rim of support, and that's fine. So, of course, this could just be the beginning of your design. Anything at all could go on that lid, Anything at all could go on the sides or on the inside of the box, and it should work great. Just make sure, and you could also make this smaller. I just wouldn't go less than half the size. We made these pins about 10 millimeters. I wouldn't go less than 5 as a guideline if you're making structures like that. Okay, thank you everybody. This has been the advanced video making a hinged box for today.